welcome to Fearless Friday. I'm Tanya Eberhardt, founder of BrandFace, and we help real estate agents differentiate themselves. We do that through personal branding.
I'm Michael Carr. I'm the Abundant Life Broker and the COO of BrandFace. And we do the Fearless Friday episodes to help agents take the fear out of putting themselves out there. And we've got a really unique program here today for you. Tanya and I just got back from the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. And although the trip did not start off as branding, it definitely ended up as branding because we eat, sleep, and breathe branding. And we've got a fantastic show for you today, and it will relate to real estate. Stay tuned.
So we decided to share with you today the 4 critical lessons we learned. The title of today's presentation is Bourbon and Branding Lessons from the Trail.
We're going to start with our personal favorites, all right, which is Maker's Mark. Everybody's got a favorite, right? But that's ours. Not just the bourbon itself, but the distillery, which is what we're going to talk about here and how these tie in together. All right, Maker's Mark is the oldest operating bourbon whiskey distillery, which is pretty awesome. Bill Samuel Sr., though, this is the interesting story. Bill Samuel Sr. thought that his dad, and actually it was his family's recipe, it had started long before his dad, several generations back. He thought it was horrific. He told his wife, it burns all the way down, it's not even good. And he was so serious about it when he took over the distillery that in a ceremony, he burnt the family recipe, which is pretty awesome, actually, you know. And so in 1943, he found a new location in Loretta, Kentucky, which is where they are still located right now, on top of a Kentucky limestone lake. Very, very large lake was part of the reason why he chose that particular location. And then because of the limestone, the high limestone content inside the water, which is very important for bourbon. You don't want any iron in your water. Their goal was to make a sweet bourbon and without any of the harshness that his family recipe had, and one that doesn't, in his words, blow your ears off, which we thought was funny. After trying all kinds of different recipes, many different recipes, including bread, they settled and found upon a winter wheat style that instead of the normal rye, a lot of bourbon has rye in it, they decided on the winter wheat instead because they felt like it was a smoother finish. And so there is not only you see the picture of Maker's Mark, which we're going to talk about right here in a minute, but you also see the Guinness World Records there for the oldest bourbon whiskey distillery in the world. So fantastic. Woodford Reserve, another compelling story. This is all going to tie together, so y'all stay with us. A relatively new bourbon, just started in 1990. This brand was introduced in 1996, actually, as the official bourbon. They started in 1990. They were introduced in 96 as the official bourbon of the Kentucky Derby. And they use a modern-day process, fairly modern-day process when storing their bourbon that sets them apart, and we'll discuss that next. It's also the bourbon that is used in the $1,000 mint julep. If you've ever been to the Kentucky Derby in the infield there, they sell a $1,000 mint julep cocktail that is served on Derby Day. And although it's a relatively new brand, it operates on the grounds of Kentucky's oldest distilling site. All right, actually, building that you see right there is the oldest building continually operating distillery. We're going to show you Buffalo Trace. Named as a tribute to the buffalo that carved a pathway across the Kentucky River, followed by American early pioneers. Buffalo Trace has been making bourbon for over 200 years. It's the oldest continually operating distillery in America. During Prohibition, which is their claim to fame, they were even permitted to remain operational. It helped the fact that one of the owners was related to the president of the United States at the time. And they were able to make whiskey that you could get with a prescription. It was medicinal. So they never stopped making it even during Prohibition and were able to legally continue making it. Slide number 4, Wild Turkey. You may be familiar with it. Wild Turkey bourbon gets its name in a pretty cool way. They had a mid-level executive that was sneaking and creating his own blend, trying to improve upon and the whiskey that they were already making. He got lucky enough to be invited to a turkey hunt, which was always a part of something they did every year. You were lucky enough to get invited to this by the owner. He brought along this recipe that he had made, and then later he was asked to come back, and the owner said, bring some of that wild turkey blend that you made. And then it came out that he had been experimenting, and they loved it so much, they not only, I think, stuck to the recipe, they started calling it wild turkey, and that's how it got its name.
All right. So that was a little bit of the history behind just 4 of the distilleries we went to. We couldn't go through them all today, so we chose just like a collection of things that were really memorable about several of them on the trail. And talking about the second biggest lesson we learned, other than everybody has their own story, right? They have a compelling story. The second thing we learned is everybody also has a very unique twist to their bourbon or their product. So when we're talking about Maker's Mark, probably everybody has seen that red seal. I'll go back a couple slides here. The red wax seal on the Maker's Mark bottle. They're the only ones in the world that have that, and that was brought to us by Margie Samuels, the wife of Bill Samuels, the one who burned the recipe. So Margie was actually a very big force behind Maker's Mark, and she brought lots of branding and unique branding ideas and unique twists to the product itself. And where the whole mark came from, the Maker's Mark name came from, she was a collector of pewter and of cognac bottles. And she noticed on all of those that they had the maker, the mark of the maker. So she flipped it over and said to her husband one day, look, that's it. Look, that one has the Maker's Mark. And boom, the rest is history. That became Maker's Mark. And so as you'll see, as we're going through all of this, there are so many unique things to each distillery, but this was probably our favorite for several reasons. Margie was really a branding force, and you'll see more about her in just a moment. Every single bottle is actually still hand dipped in the wax today by people on an assembly line. The assembly line where they hand dip them is up further to the right, but all those blowers that you see right behind the picture of Margie here, where they dry the wax seal onto the bottle. So again, everybody has like a different thing, with regard to different unique twists with regard to their product, and that was one that Margie brought to the table. This is also Michael on the trip last weekend, actually dipping his own Maker's Mark bottle in the wax. When you buy a bottle at their gift shop, you can dip your own wax, which is awesome, which is an awesome keepsake. So moving on to the next distillery that had an amazing, unique twist. So Woodford Reserve, even though they're a relatively young bourbon, that site and the buildings have been used to make bourbon for longer than any other distillery. And they have an awesome process where they use these 3 copper pot stills. And they're the only bourbon that is triple distilled too. They only produce small batches, so they do boast about being one of the smallest, if not the smallest, on the bourbon trail as far as the distilleries go. They prefer that whole boutique. And when Michael said we're kind of going to match this up to real estate a little bit, Wild Turkey, as you'll see in a moment, a more mass production kind of thing. And they had a compelling story. They had awesome things about them. But Wild Turkey was much more volume and mass produced, kind of like the bigger brokerages, right? And then the Woodford Reserve would be more like your boutique brokerages. So everybody has their own unique stories with this. But Woodford Reserve is also the only heated cycle barrel houses in the world. And what that means is the way bourbon is produced when you put it into a storage house, usually this huge building, this barn, some of them are up to 7 stories high and higher. And the bourbon, or as they call it, distiller's wine, is put into the barrels, and it's more like moonshine or white lightning at that point. Putting it into the barrel is actually what turns it into bourbon. And when you put it into the barrel, it ages for years. Now, every distillery is different with regard to that too, but it ages usually for several years. It has to age at least 2 to become a bourbon, to be a certified bourbon. But the movement of the liquid of the distiller's wine in and out of the wood of the barrels is what gives it that awesome wood kind of oak flavor. from the barrels. Most people take years and years to go through that natural cycle because you go through summer and then fall and then winter. And when the weather gets cold, the alcohol does not move into the wood as much. When the weather gets hot, it moves into the wood, so it goes in and out of the wood with the season changes. Woodford Reserve does, they actually heat their warehouses in intermittent cycles in the winter. So they simulate more aging in a shorter period of time. So I hope that all makes sense, but that's one thing that made them very unique. And then the other one, this unique twist I absolutely love. Wild Turkey boasts of the only active father and son duo of bourbon master distillers in the world. So you're looking at Jimmy and Eddie Russell here, and I believe that's Jimmy on the right and his son Eddie there on the left. But they, as we said, have a much larger operation. They're designed with a high volume in mind. They still have their original yeast strain that they use from the very beginning, proprietary only to Wild Turkey. And their oak barrels receive a number 4 char inside of each one, which means just like a deeper, darker char. When they char that wood, burn it inside the barrels to give that bourbon a great smoky wood flavor. So as you can see, you've got Maker's Mark with their red wax seals. You've got Woodford Reserve with their more boutique approach and using the heat cycling in the barrel houses, 3-pot stills distilled 3 times. Then you've got Wild Turkey with the father-son duo and the number 4 chars. And it's, so everybody has their uniqueness. So you might head out to the Bourbon Trail thinking we're going to drink some bourbon and it's all going to taste alike. Just like some of you might get on the phone with me and Michael and say, okay, I'm a real estate agent. Really, we're just kind of all alike, right? So how on earth are you going to help me figure out how I'm different from everybody else? Well, I can tell you, if bourbon can do it, we can do it.
Okay, so now you've stuck with us. You're beginning to see how we are pairing bourbon and BrandFace and branding for your real estate career and why this is important, okay? And so what we noticed when we went and we toured these things is, as the pun is, the message is distilled. It became very clear when you looked at these distilleries that every one of them found a point of differentiation in which they expanded upon and why you would like their bourbon the best, okay? And the story always included the people. It always included the people that had led them to where they were. You can feel this when you take their tour. They're very proud to be a part of it. And what we're trying to bring to the real estate branding industry is that very story. It is about you and what makes you do what you do and why you do it. They also have proprietary ingredients in the bourbon. They're not all the same. They have to be the same in certain ways by law for them to actually be bourbon, which an interesting point is bourbon is only made in the United States. That is international law. 90% of it is made in Kentucky, although it can be made anywhere in the United States. And the proprietary ingredients, some of them have to stay the same, or some of the ingredients have to stay the same, but then they can add proprietary ingredients to change the flavor profiles, just like we as real estate agents can do that with our brand. It's proprietary process to make the bourbon, just like we can make proprietary processes in how we deal with our clients, whether they be a buyer, whether they be a seller. And then how they're different from other distilleries is so vitally important, just like it's important to point out how real estate agents are different. So when you're attracting your ideal customer, you're wanting to explain, this is why I am different. Yes, we're all realtors or real estate agents, I should say, or brokers, realtors if we belong to the National Association, but we are still very much different inside of that platform.
And so now we move into the 4th critical lesson we learn on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, and that is the devil is in the details. So what we mean by this is each one of these distilleries we're going to talk to you about today is they have unique things that they take all the way through their brand. So we always like to say to our agents, when you put your brand out there, when we put it all together for you, and you've got that beautiful brand displayed on all your everyday marketing platforms, don't forget to take it that extra mile. Put it on everything. Wear your signature brand color. Put your stamp on things. Make sure that when you do a piece that goes out to everybody, every part of your brand that should be communicated is in that. So taking it all the way through. And so one of the distilleries that does that really well is Woodford Reserve. As you guys know, they are the official bourbon of the Kentucky Derby. And on the right here, you will see one of their bottles. They do a commemorative bottle every year for the Derby, and they have a different gorgeous label on the front of it. And that is just one of the ways they extend their brand into one of the world's most popular sporting events. Also notice that this photo in front of you as well has the 3 copper stills on every single barrel head. And that is just another way of taking that brand all the way through to say that's one of the things that separates us as Woodford Reserve. We distill it 3 times in old copper pot stills. And so just all of those little details make a big difference. Now, moving ahead to Maker's Mark. Gosh, I learned so much from Margie Samuels on this trip, and what a brilliant branding mind she had, all the way down to 2 things that you're going to notice in this photo when I point them out. On each one of the shutters that you'll see in front of you is actually carved out the shape, the unique shape of the Maker's Mark bottle that's still in that exact same shape today. Inside of every one of these shutters, you can see that. The other thing is the red, the color red that the shutters are on all of those buildings and on distillery grounds are the exact color red of the red wax seal that is hand dipped for every bottle. So think about that, just taking it all the way through. And I just noticed here too, the red berries or tips on these bushes down here too. I mean, it's everything. It's everything they pull into it. And it's just a really beautiful thing to see.
Maker's Mark wanted to appeal to a high-end customer, and they wanted to go after people who demanded an exclusive product that, of course, was tasted great, was smooth, and whatnot. So for their 60th anniversary of Maker's Mark, Rob Samuels, who runs the company now, wanted to make a little splash. So he teamed up with world-renowned glass-blowing artist Dale Chihuly. We're big Dale Chihuly fans. He's out of the Northwest, and he's very, very famous, not only for the uniqueness of his glass blowing, but also for his ability to brand himself. Like, one of the things that we love so much about him is early on in his career, he's traveling around. He's got some salespeople out there putting their pieces out into different craft stores. He's trying to get a foothold. He goes to a craft store in Arizona and he says, have you been able to sell my pieces? And they're like, we're having a hard time selling them. And he goes, do you have a pen? And the lady says yes or whatever. And he goes over and, in a natural response, people would think that he's going to mark it down. He added a 0 and changed the decimal point and said, I bet we can get some respect now, which I absolutely love about Dale Chihuly, because his glass pieces bring more money than any other glass artist in the history of mankind. But it is more than that. He also is a very incredible brander. And for Rob Samuels to bring that to Maker's Mark just shows you that he has the mind of his ancestors in that ability to market himself and brand himself. So he brings Dale Chihuly in, and they end up putting this little corridor that you see is in a what they call a rick house, but it's cut into a side of a mountain, and it keeps the temperatures perfect and all of this. And you go on your way out, you go through this long corridor. I would guess it to be 16 feet long. These are about 4-foot sections, I would say, 4x4, 4x3 sections, something like that. And there's 1,300 original pieces of Dale Chihuly, including there's a cherub on each one of them to represent what they call the angel cut, which is the amount of bourbon that evaporates into the air. So it just shows you the mind of these marketing geniuses and how they take a product and it sort of permeates through the entire industry, which is what we would like to see happen in the real estate industry, obviously. And it's very fascinating. And it's also fascinating to see how well it works.
It sure does. It sure does. And my closing remarks, if I could just leave you guys with a thought today, see the value in yourself, be Dale Chihuly from that standpoint, demand what you're worth, and put your story out there in such a way that you do get that respect from people. And then be like Margie Samuels, who never misses a detail. Every opportunity she gets to put her brand out there, extend it, work it into everything, and make sure that it's never forgotten what Maker's Mark stands for. That's what we want you to walk away with today. So if you leave with nothing more than those two things, then that'll make us happy. And I'll let Michael close us out.
Absolutely. I mean, we hope you take some of these points and start applying them to how you do your own marketing. The attention to detail, first it starts with removing the fear of putting yourself out there. People need to know what you do, and then infusing your story to it. They need to know why you do it. They need to know who you are, and then not missing those details of putting that out there in every opportunity that you can. A lot of people they always have business cards, but think about the last time you actually passed one out. And my grandfather used to say, if you pass out 10 business cards a day, you'll never go hungry. And there's so much truth to that. And that's just one example of a very cheap way that you can put your mark out there to society, to let them know that you love what you do and you can't wait for the opportunity to do it with them. Right? So I'd like to close with this, discussyourbrand.com. That is where you can get in touch with Tanya and I. If you have a brand, if you don't have a brand, if you're not sure if you have a brand, feel free to reach out to us through discussyourbrand.com. And we would love to get on with you and talk to you and sort of see where you're standing and where you want to head. And remember to keep those goals in mind and continue to move forward. If you've been at any one of our Fearless Friday episodes, you know that I like to finish out our episodes with prosperity favors the bold, folks. So be bold. Be bold in your career. If you desire it, your future requires it, folks.
Thank you, Michael. Be bold. Have some bourbon. Everybody have a great week, and we'll see you next time on Fearless Friday.
Bye-bye.